January 4, 1974, exactly at 2:50 a.m., in a quiet suburban neighborhood of Vallejo, California, a chilling sequence of events unfolded on 1561 Walnut Avenue. The streets were pitch black except for a single streetlight illuminating the crime scene. A family had just returned from a New Year's Eve party, only to find their lives forever changed. Blood-stained footprints on the grass led to a disturbing discovery. In this fateful night, the lifeless body of a beloved father and husband, David Faraday, 17 years old, lay cold. Vast moonlit shadows danced across the eerie scene as the once serene neighborhood became a nightmarish reality. Police officers would later recall that the air remained still, as if the very atmosphere had been frozen in terror. Crime scene tape cordoned off the area, marking the spot where Faraday's life was brutally cut short. A chilling sense of unease settled over the onlookers who had witnessed the aftermath. In this instant, the dark specter of the Zodiac Killer began to take shape. Standing amidst the crime scene, the figure of Zodiac Killer looms over the lifeless body of David Faraday. He wore a distinctive red plaid shirt, dark pants, and was described as being around 5 feet 8 inches tall. Faraday's eyes, frozen in perpetual terror, seemed to stare into another world as the killer stood above him, unrepentant and unafraid. This enigmatic figure left behind a trail of cryptic messages, forever etching a place in the annals of true crime history. The darkness surrounding the killer's identity only added to the mystique. Eyewitness accounts spoke of hearing the sounds of a car speeding away in the distance just moments before the discovery. Neighbors reported hearing a faint whisper, a single word, "Run." This chilling phrase echoed across the sleepy neighborhood, foretelling the horrors that were to come. The Faraday family's New Year's celebration turned into a nightmare, as their world was shattered in an instant. The sound of sirens pierced the night air as emergency responders made their way to the gruesome scene. Before we go further, hit subscribe and the bell. We post new cases every single day. The stories we share may be dark, but they're an essential piece of history. Your support means the world to us. Stay with us, and together, we'll unravel the most intriguing and the most terrifying cases of all time. From infamous killers to the crimes that shook the nation, we'll leave no stone unturned. With every new case, we'll delve deeper into the psyche of those who perpetrated unspeakable horrors. Let me take you back to the very beginning of this story, the birthplace of the notorious Zodiac Killer, a serial murderer that left an indelible mark on the world. Born in the late 19th century, the 1960s in Northern California would prove to be a perfect storm of violence and depravity, setting the stage for a series of unsolved murders that continue to haunt us to this day. The Zodiac Killer's reign of terror was a symphony of brutality, terrorizing multiple couples and families, sending cryptic messages to the media. As we delve into this case, we'll examine the motives behind this killer's actions, analyzing every shred of evidence left behind. The question remains, what made this killer tick? Our central person in the Zodiac Killer case is Arthur Lee Allen, born on June 18, 1933, in Waterford, California, now living in Vallejo, California, with his wife, Betty, and 2 kids, John and Donna. He was a 33-year-old man working as a salesman at the time of the first reported murder in 1968. Allen's daily life seemed quite ordinary, spending time with his family and friends, with whom he played chess. He was known to have a good sense of humor and was well liked by those who knew him. Little did people know that a different side of Allen was brewing beneath the surface. Arthur Lee Allen had a relatively stable life, working at the local department store, and living in a middle-class neighborhood. As a salesman, Allen would typically be away from home for extended periods, interacting with various customers. When he was home, he would spend quality time with his family and friends, making it seem like he was a devoted father and husband. Allen's co-workers described him as pleasant, always smiling, and willing to offer help when needed. However, despite his likable demeanor, Allen's behavior hinted at something dark, but his acquaintances failed to notice this. Alan's relatable and sympathetic side often put people off guard when thinking about his true nature. His good sense of humor and willingness to help made him a likable person in his community. His family, too, thought he was a wonderful father, often taking his kids to the park for picnics and playing with them. Alan was an avid chess player and an avid reader of science fiction novels. People in his neighborhood often spoke highly of him and thought he was just an ordinary family man living a quiet life. However, Alan's relationships were more complex than they appeared. It was clear that he trusted very few people, often keeping his thoughts to himself, especially when it came to his personal life. He had a close friend, David Faraday, with whom he enjoyed playing chess. In addition, Alan was a member of the local chess club, which helped him maintain his social connections. As we continue to examine Alan's life, we must ask, what sparked the sudden change in his behavior, which would eventually lead to the series of gruesome murders that terrorized Northern California? It was a chilly autumn evening on December 20, 1968, in Benicia, California. Residents were going about their daily routines, unaware that a horrific crime was about to unfold. The sky was a deep shade of gray, with a gentle breeze blowing across the Bay Area. Temperatures had dropped to a crisp 48 degrees Fahrenheit, with a hint of fog rolling in from the San Francisco Bay. The quiet neighborhood on Cherry Street was about to be shattered by a brutal and shocking crime. The events leading up to the crime began with the disappearance of high school student David Faraday, who had been planning to take his girlfriend Betty Lou Jensen to a lake in Vallejo to watch the stars. Unbeknownst to David, his plans were about to take a deadly turn. At 8:50 p.m., David and Betty Lou arrived at the lake and parked their car. As they got out, they were approached by a man with a gun, who ordered them back into the car. David, trying to save his girlfriend, sped off, but their vehicle was ambushed by the killer. As David's car rounded a curve on Lake Herman Road, the killer sprayed the vehicle with gunfire. David Faraday was shot in the head, and the car skidded to a stop. Betty Lou Jensen was hit by multiple bullets and died instantly. The killer then got out of the car and shot David multiple times, killing him. The attack was swift and merciless, leaving no doubt that the killer had come prepared to take lives. One of the most shocking details of this crime is that only a few days later, the killer sent a cryptic letter to the Vallejo Times-Herald, claiming responsibility for the murders. The note read, "I am the one they call the Zodiac." The full horror of the crime became clear: a random, senseless attack on two innocent teenagers, leaving behind a trail of blood and terror in its wake. The killer's taunting letter seemed to be a cruel joke, leaving investigators and the public alike wondering, what's next? As the investigation began, one thing was certain: this was going to be a case that would haunt the Bay Area for decades to come. As police first responded to the gruesome crimes, they were met with a wave of fear and uncertainty. The police department in Vallejo was already dealing with a tough case, and the Zodiac Killer's letters only added to the chaos. In July 1969, the killer sent a letter to the San Francisco Chronicle, claiming responsibility for the murders and hinting at more to come. The department quickly realized they were in for a long and difficult battle. They set up a task force, but the investigation was still in its early stages. The key piece of evidence that changed everything was a cipher sent by the killer in a letter to the Chronicle in 1969. The cipher, which read 3-1-5-9-0, was a cryptic message that seemed to point to a specific location on a map. The FBI was called in to help decipher the code, but it wasn't until months later that they finally cracked it. The decoded message revealed the location of a possible crime scene, leading police to a remote area near the city of Vallejo. The discovery sparked renewed hope that they might finally catch the killer. As the investigation continued, several names began to emerge as suspects. There was Arthur Lee Allen, a convicted child molester who matched the description of the killer. Then there was Richard Gaikowski, a journalist who had a history of violence and had been known to wear a similar costume to the one worn by the Zodiac Killer. Another suspect was Ted Kaczynski, also known as the Unabomber, who had a history of mental illness and a penchant for violence. These suspects were all considered potential leads, but none of them ever panned out. The case was starting to feel like a never-ending puzzle. The red herring was the lead on David Faraday, a 17-year-old high school student who had been suspected of being the Zodiac Killer based on a supposed eyewitness account. The investigation had been focused on Faraday for months, with police raiding his home and interviewing his friends. But when they finally found that the eyewitness had actually misidentified Faraday, the whole thing came crashing down. The wasted time and resources were a major setback for the investigation, and the case was starting to feel like a lost cause. The police were getting desperate, and the pressure was mounting. As we conclude our investigation into the Zodiac Killer, a new development has come to light that sheds an entirely new light on this infamous case. In 2018, the Zodiac Killer's infamous 340-character cipher was finally cracked by a team of codebreakers from the University of California, Berkeley. What made this revelation even more stunning was that it revealed a message sent by the killer to the San Francisco Chronicle, which read, "I hope you are having lots of fun. I am. Be my Valentine." This was a shocking twist to the case, as many had speculated the killer's motives to be more sinister. This cryptic message now leaves us questioning whether the Zodiac Killer's intentions were truly as dark as we thought. Further analysis of the cracked cipher has led to a more detailed understanding of the killer's personality. The codebreakers discovered that the message was likely written by the Zodiac Killer's first known victim, Paul Stine's son. The son of Stine had been secretly communicating with the Zodiac Killer for years. The killer's intentions may have been to create a twisted game of cat and mouse. It's now clear that the Zodiac Killer's modus operandi involved manipulation and control. The verdict is still out on the Zodiac Killer's case, as it remains one of the most infamous cold cases in American history. Despite the recent breakthrough, the killer's true identity remains a mystery. However, this revelation has led to renewed efforts to identify the killer, with investigators re-examining old evidence and tips. A DNA analysis of the killer's letters and cryptograms is underway. It's a small glimmer of hope for those seeking justice for the victims and their families. The key players involved in this case have all moved on with their lives. Robert Graysmith, the infamous amateur sleuth, has continued to write books and create documentaries about the case. Paul Avery's family has kept his memory alive through various charity work. The Vallejo Police Department has finally acknowledged the significance of the Graysmith's amateur sleuth efforts. Graysmith's research helped to bring attention to the Vallejo Police Department's handling of the case. The city of Vallejo has taken steps to acknowledge its failures.